I mean, we're going to give you that therapy session again because that's all we do seemingly on these podcasts these days as Arsenal fans is provide a therapy session. So I'm going to be joined by three wonderful people to talk us through what happened in yesterday's catastrophe. Hello and welcome to the Gouda Talk. Back again with you guys for another show. You can tell by the look on Adam's face what type of show we're going to have today. Speaking of which, hello Adam, mate. Are you well? Are you good? How are we today?
Yeah, I'm well. I'm good. And I'm smiling through the pain. That's what I'm doing.
That's all we can do. That is a number one Arsenal sort of. If you ever manage to set up, like as an Arsenal fan, I've never had to do this, being in a relationship for 8 years now. But setting up a Tinder profile is smiling through the pain is usually one of the top things on the profile list, I think, of many Arsenal fans. It's a key skill in life and relationships sometimes too. Just don't tell the missus. Chris, it's an absolute pleasure to have you back on. One of our expert members making his second appearance after his fantastic debut. How are you doing, mate? Are you well? Are you good?
I'm doing well. Still recovering from yesterday's result.
Yes, this is going to be a theme, isn't it? This is going to be a theme. And finally, the man to perk us all up, Drew. How are you doing, mate? Are you well?
Secretly, I'm not on camera because I'm hiding my pain unlike the rest of you guys.
Yes,
so
hiding. It's not fair. It's cheating. It's cheating at this point.
No, it's good to be back. I know I've been gone a while. There's a lot of stuff going on around here, but
AWOL.
And AWOL. That's right. Good pun, buddy.
Yeah. AWOL for a while. Yeah, 100%. But I mean, you came back at the right time.
Of course.
To discuss yesterday's catastrophe. Well, we're going to talk about that, and we're going to kick off straight with Adam in getting your reaction immediately to what was, I mean, I'd like to say it was a surprising result, but the longer the game went on, the more likely I felt that was going to happen, and it did.
Yes. I think disappointing is the only word I could use. We looked flat. And I think at some point when I was watching the game, I saw that David Luiz, I was saying, don't do it again in relation to him knocking the ball over the top, which just goes to show if I can see it, I surely know that Brendan Rodgers and all the Leicester players would have seen that he had knocked it over the top time and time again. And we just became predictable. And that is a problem. You never, as Drew kind of said earlier, you're never going to break down a team if you have predictable patterns of play, especially a team defending deep. And yeah, we suffered at the Vardy sword yet again.
the Vardy sword, that sounds dodgy. What is Vardy doing?
Well, you don't want to know.
No, we don't. Chris, it was, I mean, frustrating is the word. Peter Renner in the chat. It's just that simple word. Just frustrating is the way that we, and I mean, Hambo in there says sigh, which is also probably a good way of summing things up as well. But Chris, for you, tell me what the most disappointing thing was about the game.
I think it was the lack of creativity for me, and I think that's a common theme for everyone. The first half was promising. It was probably some of the better football that we played in one half against one of the better teams. But I do think that second half, it was a carbon copy of the Villa, Spurs, City games where we couldn't break down that team in the second half. And there was a lot of sideways and backwards passing that was just very difficult to watch, considering the attacking players that we have on our side.
Yeah, the amount of talent that you would expect to see on that pitch, and we did have on that pitch, that just couldn't seemingly break it down. We're going to go into some of the tactics a little bit later, courtesy of Drew and his scrolling through social media. We're going to look through some more of that in a bit. But Drew, Chris said there, the lack of creativity, and I suppose the biggest question to ask is that, can you see an immediate solution with the personnel available to solve that issue?
I mean, yeah, it's. I kind of think you alluded to it before you did your breakdown video about it. If Samoa would have been better than Thomas Partey to prioritize. But for me, the solution is playing a different brand of football. The solution is not necessarily a personnel problem. I feel like if you go into a match with arguably the 11 that we fielded against Leicester, you would have looked at that team and said, on strength of it, the vast majority of us would want to see that exact team, or maybe one change in that 11. Maybe you would have gone with Pepe, or someone else other than Daisabashi, whatever it may have been. But for me, if you look at that team, there is enough creativity, both quality on the ball to break down deep block, with driving play, or just the ability to pick a decent pass where there was really no excuse. And I think early doors, you have that disallowed goal. This entire show and the post-mortem of the match is a very different discussion on multiple levels. So it's hard to really say that it was all doom and gloom, maybe 75% doom and gloom. I feel like I might be being slightly generous. I feel like we're all disappointed in a lot of areas. But for me, and I've been banging on about this, I guess, for this entire season, the solution isn't about the players. It's about the system that we're employing with the players we have. The players we have are more than good enough to be creative, to create an amount of chances. A stat came out yesterday where at current, we average, I think it's 8 or 9 shots per 90 minutes, which is the least amount of shots per 90 minutes we've averaged in like the last 15 seasons in the Premier League, which is awful. So it's not a lack of quality. If you look at the players we have in the attacking third, even the midfielders now, there's more than enough about this team to be far more creative, to break teams down. It's the instructions now, and I'm not trying to jump on. Obviously, the people are already asking for Arteta's head, and I can't even I can't even fathom that. But you do have to say now that you can be a little bit more critical, can't you? You gave him that grace period. You saw the progress from last season. Now you need to make more progress this season, and we haven't really seen it yet. So I think that's where the frustration comes from, and a lot of it is targeted correctly, but a lot of it is targeted incorrectly, and that's the balance we have to find. And of course, we always struggle with balance. So there you go.
Balance is the word that we seemingly can't seem to integrate into this Arsenal team. Adam, you were shaking your head when Drew mentioned the early goal that was disallowed. Talk me through why that decision. I've watched it back so many times, and the only reason I can come to is that literally the reason being that Xhaka is just there. In my opinion, he's not playing the ball. He doesn't move to play the ball. He gets out of the way of the ball. He's not in the way of Schmeichel. The ball's going nowhere near Schmeichel. Why? Just why?
I'm glad that you said the only reason isn't because you think there's a concerted effort by the media or the FA to get one of them.
I try to avoid saying that.
Yeah. But no, I think it's pretty much that. We know that there's a goalkeepers union. There's a lot of protection that they get. We often see that they get fouls which aren't really fouls, and I think this was just an extension of that. Really, Xhaka was in his eye line as the corner was being taken, but moved into an onside position and out of his eye line. And I think Schmeichel just made a real mess of it, and he got lucky. That being said, though, that was 3 or 4 minutes into the game, and we still had 87 minutes left to score another goal. So I'm not even pinning any of my disappointment on that lack of a goal at all, because we had other chances, and Leicester should have been put away.
They should have been put away, we should have taken the chances that we created. Like, we talk about a lack of creativity, and Chris, you kind of said there in your opening statement about there being a lack of creativity, but we did still create chances. I mean, there was a comment that I want to highlight in the chat that was just brought up a second ago. Daniel Robert actually says creativity was not the problem yesterday. On Lacaz's day, he would have had about 4 by half-time. We had 11 chances in the first half alone. And I suppose that's something that maybe goes under the radar, and even I can be guilty of not seeing that there are clear-cut chances made. And I suppose when we think of creativity, it's about that frequency of chances kind of back-to-back, and how we used to like pepper teams. Like, we'd find ourselves camped outside the box against oppositions lots of times. But that was intertwined with passes being played, chances being made, and that doesn't seem to be happening on as quite frequent of a basis. But specifically, Lacazette missed some big chances yesterday. The one that obviously he did technically score in our minds, but the big one that comes to mind is the ball that comes across the face of the box, and he just misses it with his head. Somehow, just misses it. I suppose to kind of mould this question would be, at what point do we have to turn around and say that you need to take this guy out the firing line and move Aubameyang into the centre?
I think it's a difficult question. And I think going back to Daniel's comment, I think it's the second half creativity that most of us had problems with, especially once we went down a goal. It's at that point, the urgency, the intensity, it never picked up. And it was very similar to the City game, where if you're down by 1, commit the men going forward into the box and try to get yourself in a scoring opportunity to create a chance. In terms of Lacazette, I think he's in a difficult position. He was very isolated for most of that game. If you watch him play, like, he was trying to get involved. He was doing all the right things to find pockets of space, but the middle was so cluttered that it's difficult to pin that on just Lacazette himself. For the chance that he missed, every striker is going to miss a good chance on their day, but sometimes it's just creating more chances will allow him to have more opportunities to score. So for me, not creating more chances, that one miss everyone's going to talk about, but I think Aubameyang had another free header as well. Both of those players are not meant to be taking headers generally on their day. Free headers, open headers, they can hit them in, but in high traffic areas, it's sometimes more difficult.
I was talking on the Raw Reaction show straight after the game, saying that it's weird that I miss Olivier Giroud. Like, the amount of crosses that are going into the box, he would be relishing some of those chances. It's like we've started to create the chances that he would thrive on just 3-4 years after we needed to, and that's incredibly frustrating. Drew, I know that you could be quite strong in your opinion about where Aubameyang should and should not play. What do you make of the argument to put him central?
I mean, I kind of summed it up in the WhatsApp yesterday. I mean, I've tweeted ad nauseum at this point. I can't even go through it anymore. But essentially, it's not where you play Oba; it's how you play with Oba that matters most. I've been saying this. He is a player who, for what he does, there are few, if any, in Europe that are better than he does. He's a brilliant poacher in the final third. He knows how to make those back post runs, run off the shoulder. He understands space. He makes the runs. The problem is that we're not really at the moment playing in a system that is highlighting his strengths to a maximum level. And people do forget that at Dortmund, when he switched to center forward and started scoring goals, he didn't start scoring goals until the second half of his first season at center forward. In the Hinrunde, he was struggling for goals. He scored here and there a bit patchy, but it wasn't to the level that you associated with him moving forward. Dortmund had to tweak how they played to get the best out of him at center forward. And if you're not direct and incisive and allowing him the space to thrive, he's not going to get you goals. There's no amount of cutbacks against a deep block that he's going to be able to find chances off. And while it may come off some of the time, it's not going to be reliable enough. Too many teams now are good at sitting back in deeper blocks and countering in the Premier League. It's no longer a bottom third thing that you find in the Premier League anymore. Clubs like Leicester are going to come away to a bigger team and sit, like we just saw, and sit deeper and take those chances away. And managers know that now. So if you know that, and this is kind of my gripe on the tactical level, is if I'm all for Arteta trying to nail down the system that he wants for the players and to understand, to get into, but there has to be that switch that you flip. And you and I have talked about this quite a bit, where Barca would possess the ball under Pep for hours, and they wouldn't do anything. But seemingly at the flip of the switch, 2 passes, they've gone from their third to the opposition third, and they get a chance. We don't really do that. We have to know when when the opening comes. We don't see that opening and we don't utilize it. But also, the onus has to be on the players to make those runs. So the question is, are the players not making them because they just don't see them, or are they being told not to make them? So these are kind of the questions where I feel like the fan base wants answers for, but we're not really getting. But in terms of Oba, again, it's not about, if he's on the left or central. Last season he played on the left quite a bit. He still bagged goals. It's not about left or central. It's about making sure that you play in a way that you highlight his strengths. And that's, for me, that's the meat and drink about when you're a football manager and when you're a coach. You have to look at your players and say, how do I get the best out of them and so I can get the required results? And right now, with a lot of our players, not just Oba, but maybe you can argue, like I said, and Xhaka for years at the club, we haven't really been doing that. So if we're going to change that, we have to make those adjustments, and hopefully they come.
Let me just touch on the Barcelona point specifically, and kind of how that passing, because I think there's a bit of an obsession with speed and pace when it comes to build-up play often, especially on social media, and people say that Arsenal are slow. Now, Barcelona were not speedy and pacey in their build-up play when they were playing under Pep Guardiola. There were some quick interchanges of passes, don't get me wrong, but it was about biding their time, waiting for that right pass, the right time, and taking a couple of risks. And the thing about Barca's players, because they're a very small, low centre of gravity, Xavi, Iniesta, Messi, etc., even David Villa to a lesser extent, in those areas, they were able to be played the ball into tight spaces, turn, play the next pass, and their passes were brave. And sometimes I feel that Arsenal players have been nearly kind of forced out of taking risks with their passes, because if there is a misplay of a pass as an Arsenal player, you get set upon. Like, you really get set upon. And now that they're kind of conditioned in a way to try and play the safe pass over and over and over again, that we have lost that element of risk and bravery in our passing. And maybe we're no longer playing that kind of that cheeky inside incisive ball in between the lines and in between the defenders, so that Aubameyang or Pepe or Lacazette can run onto those. And instead we're seeing Lacazette drop deeper and deeper and deeper, trying to collect the ball nearly into our own half much of the time before then playing the ball wide. And our wide areas are so saturated with the amount of plays that we use because we can't find creativity in the middle. Adam, when it comes down to kind of that second half and where we did lose the game and talking about ourselves defensively, under Arteta, defensively we've looked a lot better. Like, it has improved a hell of a lot, and that's certainly not something that he can really be truly criticised for. And the man that came on after David Luiz got injured, of course, Squadron Mustafi, someone that I've had a lot of praise for since he's under Arteta. I thought he'd had a bit of a renaissance period under the Spaniard, but coming back from injury, comes on the pitch and, in my opinion, is not positionally aware and in line with Gabriel as much as he needs to be to cover Jamie Vardy. Talk to me about the goal we conceded.
Yeah. What can you say about Mustafi? That hasn't already
Well, he's
been
rejected
said.
the contract.
Yeah, but what the surprising thing about that is that we even offered him one in the first place. That's what I can't get my head around. But yeah, I as you say, it's not the worst mistake I've seen Mustafi do, which in itself is a crazy thing to say. But Gabriel, I love the guy because he was telling him, like, get in position. What you're doing is not right. He was slow to react, and Jamie Vardy essentially had a free header in the box.
Yeah.
I think going back to the stuff about Arteta and the system, I think what he's done, and the reason why Mustafi looks so great. Can I say that? The reason why Mustafi looked as though he had improved was because we played the three at the back. It masked our defensive frailties and weaknesses and maximized our strengths. But I don't know if we have the tools in the rest of the team to be able to play the way we want and go forward that way. It's a bit of a conundrum. I feel sorry for Arteta because I don't think he got everything he wanted in order to move forward. And so we're kind of in a halfway house right now. You still have the crap players defensively that aren't going to get you where you want to be, but you don't quite have what you need in midfield and attack to get you where you want to be as well. So yeah, we're kind of stuck right now.
Yeah, there is an element of I suppose, stagnation and too much being static. We're going to talk about some of the build-up play a little bit more in a second with some stats. But Chris, when it comes down to kind of defensively still, though, I want to look at a brief positive. I feel you're a good person to talk about positive, as you often are in our chat box. But Thomas Partey's inclusion enabled us to kind of switch to this semi-back four. I'm saying that because the amount of times that Xhaka kind of dropped into the defence to make it a back three was rather frequent. But it enabled Tierney and Bellerin to get quite far up the pitch, and of course they kind of became our most creative players, arguably, in those wide areas. Do you expect this to sort of become the norm whilst Partey is in the team? And actually, on a side question, are you frustrated how little we actually gave the ball to our new signing?
I was very frustrated with how little Partey saw the ball, especially in the second half. I think The Athletic had a great article just outlining how isolated he was for most of the second half, and his presence and his ability to impose himself in the game just considerably dropped in the second half, as Xhaka and the two center backs looked to bypass him altogether and send some long balls diagonally. But just on a point to, I think, the formation shift that we had, I think it's to be expected that the first game that we play a full 4-3-3, that it's not going to be beautiful. It's not going to be perfect. Not everyone's going to be synchronous. It's going to take some time. I know people are frustrated at this point. They want to see us make that transition right away. But Arteta took some time to make us defensively resolute, and we can't just give that up overnight because we want to play more expansive football. I think part of that is up to kind of the players learning attacking patterns over time. It's going to take some time. You look at, I think, when Pep first joined City and when Klopp first joined Liverpool, for the first year and a half, their fans said they were a joke. What they were trying to accomplish, it wasn't coming through consistently every game. And I think we need to afford Arteta that patience, that it's going to take some time. And of course, just because of it's the results that we've had for the past 10, 14 years now that people are just upset and they want to see change and they want to see it right away. I think Arteta is still building towards something special. And for the time being, a lot of that creativity is coming from the flanks. It's not necessarily a bad thing, but it is that plan B. We need to have something else in the middle, whether it be more movement, more runners. I look at someone like Joe Willock and Ainsley Maitland-Niles. Or
what's his name? Mainsley, there we go.
I think I've heard of Mainsley and Emile Smith-Rowe and a few others that can actually, they have good engines, they have good work rate. If you have them kind of finding those small pockets of space, it's going to help open up some room on the flanks. I think if Arteta looks at some teams like how Liverpool play, there's not a center mid there that people in the chat are saying, we don't have that creative player, we don't have that creative player. But if you look at Liverpool, before they had Thiago, like who was their true creative player in the center of the pitch? Yeah, Henderson and Wijnaldum were people that no one ever looked to. So I think we have some internal options. It's just getting those patterns of play understood, moving the ball faster, hitting the channels with those direct passes and being more decisive. It's going to help us in the long term.
Yeah, obviously the quality of Liverpool's wingers in Mane and Salah are intense, and I think that also the role that Firmino plays often goes under. He's not the guy that you want in your fantasy team, Firmino, but he's the guy that you want in your team because of the work rate and the passing and the movement that he puts in, and I think that's really, really important. Drew, do you want to come in on that briefly?
Yeah, and I think Chris's points are incredibly valid about Liverpool, but I think the one thing that people do forget is that they didn't really need the creativity in the center of the park because Salah and Firmino and Mane had freedom on the ball to express themselves. There's a lot of interchange play, swapping flanks. They could actually run at defenses. We still haven't really seen that. And that's kind of what the thing I was talking about is. And the downside of when you're playing someone like Oba on the flank is that even when things are nailed down on a tactical level, he's never going to be the type of player to really take players on like a prototypical winger would. So that's the drawback of playing him on the flank. He's going to be a goal-scoring winger through and through. And I think the debate that maybe someone like maybe French in the chat mentions that they would like to see Oba Central is because he's not reliant on that type of brand of football on a personal level to get the best out of him. If you have a winger who can express themselves, like someone who Martinelli comes back, even Bukayo Saka's good on the ball. He can take players on and drive play forward. Oba's never that kind of guy. So these are the kind of the questions that we have that other clubs maybe really don't. I think if you look at every major domestic rival we have, they have wingers who on both flanks that can really run at you. You know, we're in a position where through poor planning of the poor regime, we ended up with Lacazette and Aubameyang, and we only should have had one of them, not both of them. Should have committed to one and used those funds elsewhere. And now we're in a bind where two of our key attacking players both want to start every week, and you probably have to make the argument they should be. So now you have to shoehorn at least one of them into a system maybe where it's not going to work out for one of them. It's worked out for Oba more than Lacazette, but the season now is working out at least overall more for Lacazette than Aubameyang. So it's typical Arsenal stuff. So, and again, I don't bemoan Arteta for this. I kind of feel bad for him. He's in a really tough position in his first full season as a manager to try to really make a system work with a lot of players who weren't really factored in because he wasn't here, and now he has to kind of play diplomat as much as trying to be a manager at the end of the day. So it's difficult. And that's something that maybe Jurgen Klopp didn't really have to tangle with. Same thing with Pep. Pep got what he wanted whenever he wanted it. It's a different scenario entirely. So,
yeah, I suppose when you're sitting there as Pep's sort of assistant and Pep's telling you what he wants, and then all of a sudden it shows up at Manchester City because that's what Pep wants. He usually gets. Whereas he comes to Arsenal, he's like, hold on a second, I'm saying all this stuff and I'm not getting anything. So it must be frustrating. It really must. We brought up Arteta, so I'll shelve the build-up play for just one more round of words. But Adam, on Arteta, I can see the anticipation in your face at this topic. Is it's hard to kind of mould a question around him at the moment because of how split people already are becoming. I mean, as you said earlier on, there are people that are already wanting to move on. Chris brought up a fantastic point about Jurgen Klopp. I feel that if Jurgen Klopp had the season that he had in his first season and were he an Arsenal manager, he wouldn't have lasted the season in Arsenal fans' minds either. I mean, Carragher kind of turned around and said something that I really agreed with Arthur. I think it was the Liverpool game where he said that what Arteta has done with the group of players that he's got is the maximum. He said he couldn't see Arteta getting any more from the current crop of players that we had. And that was before Partey came in, of course. Now Partey has come in, and you've got the options to change the midfield and change the system and the way that we play. What are you kind of expecting from Arteta? Or what are we able to expect from Arteta now up until January, I suppose?
I think so right at the beginning of the season, just after the transfer window, when you're doing your predictions, I think I was talking about Arsenal finishing 5th, with maybe like a last heartbreak moment. We could have got the top 4 if we just won X and Y and Z game, but we finished 5th. That's what I would have taken. I think now that I've seen us play, I probably have to temper my expectations a little bit more, and recognize that we finished 8th last season. So I shouldn't really expect too much of a jump. And I think I look at the games that we've got next. We've got Manchester United in there. We've got Aston Villa. We've got Spurs. And Spurs are free flow. They're scoring anyway. I think their defense still leaves a lot to be desired. So we've got some difficult games. And I think because Arteta doesn't quite know his real starting 11 just yet, I don't think he's settled on a system just yet. I don't know what we do. And I don't know where he's going to finish. I don't know what to expect from him. I think the minimum we can expect is perhaps top 6, but anything after that, I think will be a bonus, because I really don't think we are where I expected us to be. And I think because I've taken it for granted that Arteta is a rookie manager as well, and he's still learning. And because he had such a great performance at the back end of last season, I kind of just thought he'd carry that through, not also recognizing that other teams would work to figure him out, and he wouldn't have to play that kind of game as well. So, there's a lot going on, but I do think minimum top 6, and I think I'd take that right now.
Well, let me play devil's advocate then for a second. For the other side of the argument, I suppose, is that you said that he's a young manager, he's inexperienced. Now, some people, myself included, was happy to take that risk on a manager like Arteta, but there are other people out there that would say that Arsenal are in a position in the league where there are other clubs around us struggling. The Premier League is very, very open at this stage, and I wouldn't expect it to be this open even just 5-6 games in. You usually see the likes of Liverpool and City pulling away even at this early stage, or other teams dropping points, but everyone is dropping points. And some people would say that had we had an experienced manager someone that maybe could have got more from the players, that we would have been in a more advantageous position. Do you think that Arteta's position right now is almost an error by the club by not realising that there was opportunities to go for someone maybe more experienced? Yes, Adam.
Me? I don't think it's an error at all. I think it was luck on the board's part. I don't think there were many other options. I don't think it was a canny move from them. No one else is going for Arteta. We know he's going to win us the FA Cup. But I do think that he is good. I think he has a very solid football basis and understanding. He came through La Masia. He's played in different leagues. He's played in different teams for different managers. He's had a great education under Pep as well. And I think as Arsenal fans, there's something that we pine for in that great entertaining football, which I think he can eventually get us to. I just pray that we have the patience to allow him to get us there.
So you don't look at Everton with jealousy at all?
Not at all, because I really don't think that Ancelotti's going to do anything with.
I'm playing devil's advocate, Drew.
No, Tom, get out for your own show.
I'm playing. This is what a good host does. I ask questions that even I don't agree with.
I'm still going to give you grief for it.
No.
This is not fair. I know. Next, I'll be saying, I think we should have signed Awar instead of Pass. But no, I think it's important to ask the question and challenge the points, because like a lot of people would say that. Like, I saw a comment. Javier said that Carlos Ancelotti was an option at the time, Allegri was someone that was thrown around. Like, there were experienced managers around and available. Do I think that we would be in a better position with the current crop of players? And also, do I think if Ancelotti or Allegri would have come in, that we would have made a better use of the transfer window? With the recruitment team that we've got, the ownership that we've got, I don't think much would have been different at all, to be honest. In fact, you may have seen more conflict between Edu and someone like Ancelotti in terms of their transfer targets. You've seen the players that Ancelotti has gone for. He's gone for players that he has worked with previously, like Alan at Napoli, for instance, or James Rodriguez at Real Madrid. He's gone for people that he knows. Now, Arsenal haven't done that. They've gone for players that they've scouted and looked at for a long time, over a long period, like Partey, which we know has been on their roster for a long, long time, and Gabriel, who's been obviously scouted by the club for quite a serious period of time as well. They've not just... Arteta's not just gone in and poached some youngsters from Manchester City or looked at what's at Barcelona or whatever. He's gone with what the recruitment setup has done. Yes, granted, he was head coach at the start, but now he is manager and more integrated with the recruitment setup. He does have more of a say. Now, I think it's fairly obvious to see that he wanted Houssem Aouar as probably a priority. And that is someone I would say that he saw when he was at Manchester City and liked what he saw from the guy. Now, he was superseded by, if you believe the reports, Edu, and the long-term policy of the club to pursue Partey, which they had been for quite a while, whereas Aouar was more of a recent up-and-comers on the scene for the recruitment side of things in comparison to the Ghanaian. But the fact that the club are like that, both of them are communicating. We clearly still went in with a bid for Aouar. I think that's fairly common knowledge at this point. I don't think it was anywhere near what Lyon wanted for the player, and I think also Arsenal were kind of expecting to get a few more outgoings through the door, of which they could have maybe invested in both of Aouar and Partey in a perfect world had Lyon been willing to drop their valuation, which ultimately in reality wasn't going to happen. So we ended up with one. I'm glad the one that we did end up with is Partey, and I'm hoping that we can build upon that base. Chris, just before we go on to talking about build-up in a little bit more detail, I want to ask you a final question about kind of how the challenge, I suppose, that Arteta has got in moulding this midfield. And he's made, as we talked about earlier, a massive strides in improving the defensive side of our game. And Adam said that he's got the confidence that Arteta can get this sort of free-flowing, classic Arsenal style of play into this team. Can he do it with the current crop of players? And do you have the hope, like the hope that he would be able to do that, or is he going to need additional reinforcements to get that more stylistic form?
I think in order to get that stylistic form that he desires at City, it's going to be a bit different. I don't think he's going to be able to achieve that right away. Like, if you look at the players and their attacking patterns that I spoke about earlier, it's so much different to the kind of talent and understanding that our current players have. We don't have that chemistry. I also don't think that we have the players that have the work rates and the technical attributes to play like City. So I think Arteta is going to have to make a compromise just in terms of the personnel that we have right now. What's the best system and attacking patterns that are suited for them? And I think that's what he's still figuring out with this side, is that there's so many interchanging parts. There's new players that we're trying to integrate. Thomas Partey, it's his second game as an Arsenal player. It's only natural that he wasn't a focal point of our entire attack. Gabriel, he's fit in incredibly well, but you can just imagine kind of the progress that he's going to make throughout the season as he gets more and more integrated into the team. But if you're looking at just the midfield, I don't think you can play a 4-3-3 and then have Xhaka continually dropping back and saying that you have a three-man midfield. You're essentially playing a three-man backfield to build up from the back. And I know you're going to touch on this later, but I do see some issues with kind of that Xhaka, Partey, Ceballos midfield in its current configuration. They were too flat, and I wasn't really sure what the game plan was for Ceballos. But I do think if maybe at this time it's on a true 4-3-3 and a 4-2-3-1, that might serve us a bit better, where you have Xhaka and Partey sitting a bit deeper and Ceballos further up the pitch. That might help with some of the fluidity and understanding between the players. I think we saw towards the end of last season, even Ceballos and Xhaka were doing some neat 1-2 combinations and getting around opposing players. I think as time goes on, we'll just see a bit more of that. And I know it's a difficult thing for fans to grasp, but it's just going to take some time.
It is. They aren't going to grasp it. Unfortunately, it's not going to happen. The way the business, I suppose, that we're all in of looking. I mean, less so, Chris, because lucky you don't have a Twitter account, and long may that continue. If you could go back in time and not have access to Twitter these days, it would be a blessing. But we do, and we do see the utter, I suppose, what's the right word. I'm trying to put this the most respectful way I can. Rubbish is probably the best way that we it is rubbish. A lot of the stuff that we see on social media, they're utterly saying that we need to get rid of him now. And it is going to take time. And I suppose that Arsenal fans are obviously very fed up with the words that we need to be patient. They are going to be fed up with those words because we've been patient for a very, very long time. Unfortunately, we stuck with our former coach for much longer than we probably should have done. And then we appointed the wrong coach straight afterwards. And that has probably set us back quite a way, unfortunately. Now, Drew, I know you've been sitting on the edge of your seat waiting to talk through these build-up play statistics. So we're going to do that now. It's important, and I actually genuinely now have had a chance to look at them in more detail. Just talk me through what you've seen with these comparisons from the Leicester game.
Well, the first one, it's simple. It's it's minute 1 to 51. It's the passing network that we had versus Leicester's. So if you look at ours, which is the top, it's literal. It's the periphery. It's reminiscent of the struggles we had under Unai Emery, where it was just endless passing back and forth. And I understand, and you've brought it up before, it's, maybe we're trying to work the ball around to find that opening. But it also, when you're sitting deep and against a side that is well drilled, that's not rash in terms of getting out of their ship to try to win the ball back if they're not going to press, passing in and endlessly, like, that's not going to get you the opening that you desire. So that's, for me, I think that was a frustrating part. And even though we created chances yesterday, particularly in the first half more than the second half, it's how many quality chances did we really have? You think of maybe both of Lacazette's headers and maybe one other one. So, you could argue with the kind of players that we have in the 11, we need more than just that. And as opposed to where you see Leicester's, it's clear that they didn't create a lot, but at least you saw what they were trying to do in terms of when they're on the ball. They do have 1-2 combinations readily available, particularly on the left flank. This triangle is all about the place. If they shift play, there's another triangle immediately there. So for us, it's almost everyone's almost like playing like they're at stations. I mean, there's just one clump on the left, one clump on the right. There's the center backs, and there's Lacazette by his lonesome with 30 yards of space, on average from. Where he makes a lot of his passes. And then there is that second graphic that I sent you that maybe further goes into detail about this one. So this one is each zone is dedicated to a certain player, and that's the average zone where they make passes from. And you can see that there's so much overlap involved. If you look on our left flank, you have 5.5 players in the same 20 to 25 yard radius of space making passes out of that zone. And you see the same thing on the right flank as well. And then you have Partey in the middle of it. So that's very easy to defend against. 2 players can defend against 4 players that are operating in that same zone, unless you are far more direct and incisive in your play. If it's just passing around, you do drills like that when you're at that U8, U9 level. That's what one of the things that Rondos teaches you is something like this: how to possess the ball when you're under pressure, right? So, it's just.
Look at Bukayo Saka's, for instance. That for me shows you how reliant we are on Saka. Saka, you can see, is the more lighter coloured sort of white trapezium-ish shape on the left-hand side of the pitch. Look how big that space is. If that's all the space of the pitch where he's sort of on that left-hand flank, he's not playing as a number 10 where I feel he could be more effective, but you can see how much of the pitch he's having to cover to try and be creative. It's massive. There's so much emphasis.
And then you also look at Oba. And it's clear that Aubameyang is also, if you're going to use him on the flank, I mean, his XG from comparison from left wing to right wing is night and day. He's much better if you play him on the left-hand side. If you're not going to play him at center forward, you have to play him on the left, but then you don't get to play Saka. And Saka, for me, deserves to be getting the minutes he's getting. I think he's been one of our better players on balance this season, despite his age. But if you look at the average position where Aubameyang is passing the ball, that's not what you want to see from a player of his ability to get forward and get into goal-scoring chances. Similarly to Lacazette, I mean, people forget, obviously, you want him to drop deep and try to link play. But then even someone like him, if he's making his average passes from that deep, it's kind of showing that even the man we've tasked at center forward is also too regularly coming deep now to get himself involved. It shows that we're not penetrative enough. This is why we're not creating the amount of quality, really dangerous chances that maybe we have before. If you think about the best football we played under Arsene Wenger, even, obviously in the tail end of his managerial career, we were frustrated a lot. A lot of poor results, just poor recruitment. That notwithstanding, if you think about, when you really think about prototypical Emery ball, it was, maybe 5-6 passes, you see that opening, then one player drove play, and then 3 or 4 more players started to make runs into the final third, and then those passing combinations found that hole again, and then you got a goal scoring chance. Maybe the season of Mesut bagged 19 assists, that kind of playing, when you're on the ball, we're not seeing right now. No one's really taking initiative, or they're not being allowed to. It's one or the other. So that, for me, again, when you look at that map, it just reminds you of every ounce of frustration we all exuded under Unai Emery. And that, for me, is the comparison you don't want to see. And it's not that I think Arteta is not up to the task. I think it's just, and I think Chris has already said it, maybe he feels like he doesn't have the players really yet to really go on and jump to that next level. I'm not quite sure what it is. I'm not the manager. I don't know his line of thinking, obviously. But for me, you do kind of want to see a bit more. So...
Yeah, no, 100%. I think the graph is really telling about how much we. I mean, the first one especially just blows me away. How clear the passive passing around that U shape in the middle is horrific, and how isolated Lacazette is. How we're literally creating nothing centrally. Like, nothing is going through the central part of the pitch, and we've become so predictable how to defend against us. And I said it straight after the game yesterday, is that you will see teams that are lower down the league that Leicester were hit with a lot of injuries. They could only afford to play Jamie Vardy towards the end of the game, which gave them the outlet and ultimately led to them winning the match. Had he had been in from the start, it might have been a different match, with them maybe coming out a little bit more from the start of things, but they didn't do that. And Brendan Rodgers put on a tactical display of genius, it was fair to say, for the whole game, knowing he could just defend right until the end, where they could then maybe sneak a goal, which was what they managed to do. But I can see so many teams now lower down the league looking at that Leicester performance and knowing exactly what to do against Arsenal for the rest of the season. And you will see carbon copies of that performance. And now Arsenal will have a real emphasis, and they need to have a real emphasis on trying to score early. If they don't score before half-time, it's going to become increasingly difficult. And by getting an early goal, that means the opposition have to come out. They're creating them more spaces. So we really do need to risk in the first 10 minutes of games. If it goes wrong and you concede, then there is a chance for the rest of the game to try and get back into it. But it is worth taking those risks in the first 10, 15 minutes of the match to really push and get an early goal, to force the opposition to then come out, if we do manage to get a goal, to then try and capitalise on those chances. There is now a chance for you guys to throw some questions into the chat box, which I am seeing that you are already doing, which is awesome. Please keep throwing them in using that capital Q so they can stand out. Adam, we're coming to you first with Daniel Roberts' question, who asks, do you think we will actually see Alba start up front this season from the start of games?
In 1 or 2 games, I don't think it will be a regular thing. But yeah, I don't see it being a long-term thing, purely because I don't think he has the same ability to hold up the ball that Lacazette does.
He just doesn't.
Yeah, he actually just doesn't. So yeah, while he is the superior finisher, I think there's more to Lacazette's overall game that helped to make the team more of a whole, or that's so the logic goes anyway.
Yeah, no, 100% get what you're saying. Aubameyang is not the type of guy to get the pass into feet. He is the guy to get the pass through, or the pass back to finish and slot home in the box. But yeah, he's not the type of guy that's going to hold the ball up and link up play. Thibaut Pesk, Chris, says, can we finish in the top 8? I asked this to you because I know that you were preaching in the chat thinking we were going to finish 5th or above. So talk me through your reasoning.
I still think we can finish 5th or above. I think the frustration amongst fans right now is the fact that so many teams are dropping points around us. They see the Van Dijk injury at Liverpool, they see City's form, and they see that Everton's top of the table right now. So I think part of that has to do with the league's wide open at this point. So we haven't gotten the results against City, Liverpool, and now Leicester. So I think there's a bit of panic that's going on in our fan base. But I still think it's possible. You go on a run of good form. The schedule is going to lighten up a bit, but as we know in the Premier League, there's no easy games. But I think Arteta is a very intelligent coach. The amount of analysis that he went through, again, in The Athletic, there was an article basically talking about his level of analysis that he has. He's more or less like a private investigator after matches and before games. He has like diagrams drawn all over his wall just in terms of tactics. So I think at this point he's tinkering a bit, he's overthinking. But over time, as players get more integrated, and I know we've all said this, is that he's going to find his right combination. And I do think that we're going to go on a run of form. It might not be a 22 unbeaten game streak, kind of like Emery, but it might be more sustainable than that 22 game unbeaten streak was. So I do think it's possible.
Drew, question from Matthew de Souza says, out of the following, Sabas, Willian, Lacazette or Pepe, who do you feel will hit the heights this season?
It's really tricky. I don't think it's going to be Pepe. Just because I don't know if you can speculate if there's something going on that we don't know about.
Very good.
But I think he's a good player, but I feel like he's not the kind of player that Arteta necessarily wants or needs for the system he's trying to instill. It's not reflective of his ability as a footballer. I just feel like something is missing. I don't even think it's going to be Ceballos. I feel like I don't know if he's going to get enough match time. We don't know if we're going to revert back to 3 at the back, which means only 2 in midfield. We don't know if we're going to stick with if we're going to be a flat 3, if we're going to do 4-3-3, if we're going to do an 8-10 hybrid, what that means for Willian. I do think Lacazette could maybe find better goal scoring form if we find consistent chances. Again, he could have easily scored 3 goals yesterday, and he'd be sitting on six league goals this season. So it's clear that, and he's already the club leading scorer this term so far. Maybe, he'll have a bit of a rebirth. I don't really, honestly, it's hard to answer that question because I don't know what we're going to look like on the tactical level to really give you a better answer. But my gut would say Lacazette. But I think Arteta rates Nketiah enough to take Lacazette out of the firing line and give Nketiah time if Lacazette stops finding form, or even shift Oba central if you want to go with something like Saka, Oba, and Pepe on the other flank. So we'll see. But my gut would be Lacazette, and I'd love it to be Pepe because we just chucked out an absolute massive load of cash on him. But I just don't think, even back under Emery, that he was the signing that we actually should have done. So we'll see.
I can't. I hate talking about Pepe. I can't get over the price tag. It's just horrible talking about that price tag and the output. 18 goal contributions last season was good. I don't really know how he got that many last season. I still don't. When I think of the number 18 goal contributions for the performances that we saw, I just felt I don't know how we got there.
I mean, there was a few spot kicks, a few free kicks, some assists off corners as well. So a lot of it was dead balls. It wasn't even through the run of play. And that's the frustrating part. He made a meal of everything in a good way. At Lille, in the run of play, being direct, we're just not seeing the same. Yeah, we're not seeing the same Nico Pepe. So
no, it's not. It's a difference. I think it won't. I don't like talking about players negatively that are still here, but I do think it will go down as one of the worst transfers of our history, arguably. So it's a horrible thing to talk about, but that's an early doom-ridden prediction for that. Ed, Easy Isle, Adam asks, since it's Dundalk on Thursday, no offence, our Irish fans, says, do we load up with the kids or play with some regulars and try completely new tactics just to see what goes down? Should have our way with them, which is a bit of a strange way to put it. So a good time to experiment.
I agree.
Oh, no, you're not. You're just on delay. Don't worry. Ignore me. You're fine.
I think Football Manager, whenever I get the chance to come up against a team like Dundalk, I play my kids, I experiment, I do whatever I can just to make sure when the bigger games come, I can do what I want to do and hit the ground running. So yes, play the kids. Maitland-Niles, Smith Rowe, Eddie, get some goals under his belt as well. I want to see Saliba.
Can't see Saliba.
Everyone.
He's not in the squad.
Well, I'll take that one back. But as many kids as we can get in there, try out a couple new tactics as well, just to get people fit as well. I think just do what you can.
Get Balogun in the squad. Why not put Balogun in? I'm pretty sure we can. I think even though he was I think because of his age and him being homegrown, we can use him. So why not throw him into at least the bench and give him some minutes off the bench? I think it makes complete sense to try that 100%. But yeah, I agree with you. I want to see ultimately us play with a back four with a number 10. I want to see it as Emil Smith Rowe. I want it to be Smith Rowe desperately. I really want to see him get the minutes he deserves. Cyrus asked the question, what midfield three would you go with to maximise our creativity and attacking potential? And I'm going to combine that, Chris, with Peter Renner's question of, do you think having El Neni as a defensive midfielder with Partey and Ceballos in front of a midfield three, the latter two have good energy and can progress the ball very well?
These are really good questions. I'm going to just make one point on the Dundalk piece. I do want to see the young kids go because I think our first team starters are becoming a bit complacent. We're just going to be able to see, hopefully, if we can bet in some of those young players in the Dundalk game, it gives them sort of that added pressure that potentially these guys are coming up on our tails, that they have that drive, they have that determination, they have that intensity, they want to prove themselves. So it's always healthy to have that in your squad. And I think we just haven't afforded that opportunity to them yet. But in terms of the midfield, I think a lot of it depends on what Arteta wants to do and how he wants to set us up. Because if you have Aubameyang and Pepe on the wings, you're essentially not able to play the system that he's looking to play, where a lot of it is through intricate ball movement and combinations. Both players like to move with a lot of space in front of them and to be on the end of balls to score. So if you're running with that kind of a lineup, it needs to be people who can move the ball very quickly. I think if you're facing kind of that front three with Abalaka, Pepe that a lot of people want to see, I think in that kind of a midfield, you'll need someone like a Ceballos, Saka, and then Partey behind them in order to kind of advance the ball as quickly as possible. In terms of El Neni as a defensive midfielder, sorry, Tom, did you want to?
That's all right. No, go for it, mate.
As El Neni as a defensive midfielder, he hasn't done a thing wrong this season. In fact, I don't know if there's a match that we've actually lost when he's played or started, except for the Liverpool match. I think that might be the only one.
Yeah, he did start against Liverpool, didn't he? Or was that in the Carabao? Anyway, I get your point. Yeah,
he hasn't done a thing wrong, and I do think that he's shown more than he has in past seasons. He's not just a sideways passer that's recycling the ball. He's played a couple nice incisive passes that are very direct. It opened up Rapid Vienna for that goal for Aubameyang's goal, the through pass to Bellerin. So he has that ability and that potential. I think it's a good shout to try him back there too with Partey and Ceballos to allow Partey to have a bit more freedom to really show what you've been talking about, is that dynamism in midfield. He can take players on. He's quick on the turn. He moves the ball quickly up the pitch. It's about getting our front three the ball much quicker, and I think that's something that if you play Partey a bit further up, that he can offer that shield from counterattacks, but still be able to kind of progress play. So I think there's many options, and it's a good shout.
I think the El Neni thing's an interesting one. I really struggle to get past now that we've got Partey, a combination of him and El Neni. I don't know how defensive, if that's too defensive. I feel that Xhaka plays more passes in behind that people don't really notice. A lot of the time, people are very obsessed with looking at the negative with Granit Xhaka and don't often see the passes that he does play in behind very often, especially on the left-hand side to Aubameyang when he's playing there. And I get completely criticised for praising Xhaka in any way, but it doesn't stop me. But yeah, I think I like what you're saying about El Neni. I think that he's come back a completely different player since his loan at Besiktas. He genuinely, I have been very impressed by him, and the I suppose the XW, which is like your expected wins with him in the team, is weirdly quite high. So it's interesting to see if he does get more minutes. I expect him to play against Dundalk. It would be weird if he didn't. I feel with the amount of games he hasn't been playing. But yeah, it's going to be interesting to see sort of the midfield combination that we go for. Last couple of questions then before we wrap things up. Drew, question from Samuel Gray. He says, with Holding and Louise being hurt, are we looking light at centre-back again already? Are we falling into a trap of keeping that deadwood?
I mean, I don't even know at this point. I think it's clear that we've made there were some people that said that we should have gotten more than one center back in the summer. I wasn't on that thought process just because of how many we had available. But then it became clear that Socrates was put on the block. He it's clear that he doesn't want to now stay in, and he's not wanted at the club. We didn't know what was going to happen with Saliba. This is different. I think we planned this for the season to have Saliba in it. Now, him really not being available, even though he's in the squad, is a bit of a tricky one. Gabriel's done well, but it's going to end up being maybe a little bit more makeshift than we want to. I don't think that's necessarily going to be indicative of what we can do on the pitch, though. You might even see something like El Neni play right center back in the back three. You never really know.
Oh, God. It's funny because it could happen.
But let's be clear. I'm not advocating this for the record, but it's something you see Dortmund do it. They put Emre Can at right center back in the back three because they only have 4 recognized center backs, and one was injured and one wasn't available, so they only had 2 that had to put him back there. So it has happened in the past at other clubs. You might see it happen here. You have to be crafty, and Fabinho, how you set your team up ahead of those center backs is going to make or break if them being serviceable there for a match or two is a thing. But we do look kind of light. It's just, I don't know. I think we're now running into more questions than we planned for this season. And for me, that's a bit of a worry as well, because I think we have enough things we need to answer further up the pitch. And now if we have to throw in the center back problem as well, again, for yet another season, that's going to pile on the misery for certain sections and certain voices amongst the fan base that are going to use yet another really big stick to beat people with. So
Jimmy King in the chat said about Chambers being a decent shout, but I think, Chris, you've responded to him with a completely fair comment that we can't rush these types of players back from ACL injuries and expect them to come straight in.
You absolutely cannot.
It's just, you just can't have that expectation of players. We've seen it with Bellerin, we've seen it with plenty of other players in the team that just have not come back the same. And I'm really worried that the expectation is going to be the same on Martinelli when he returns, and people are going to expect him to come straight in and be that amazing breakout star that he was when he joined us, which is unrealistic at minimum. So I'm hoping that we can kind of see some players get integrated. I think Dundalk's a great chance to see some of the players like Emile Smith-Rowe get a chance, maybe even Nelson, who's kind of become a bit of a forgotten man at the club. But if the way things are going with the lack of output from the wide areas, if he starts performing and putting pressure on those wingers, there's no reason to say that he couldn't try and compete for one of those spots. I see it as an unlikely, but it all depends on performance at the end of the day. To wrap up the show, of course, we have to finish with our predictions for the games that we will face before the next chance of a podcast, which is the famous Dundalk and then Manchester United, the lesser of those two teams, of course. And Dundalk, we start with first. Adam, do you want to give me... Let's go for both at the same time. So a prediction for Dundalk and Manchester United, please.
Yeah, Dundalk 3-0. Manchester United 2-1 Arsenal. Come on.
Oh, positivity. This is what we do on every show. We predict wins and then Leicester happens.
Don't worry, I'll ruin it soon enough. Don't worry.
Okay, great. We're coming back round to you. Oh, dearie me. Chris?
3-0 Dundalk against for Arsenal. And then the United game, I think it's going to be a KG 1-1 draw.
Okay,
I don't want.
You're easing us into Drew's negativity. I like it. You're easing us in there. Go on, Drew.
Not negative. I'm just a realist. You guys are confident. I agree with the boys. I think 3-0 Dundalk. I do think that if we get what we want, we see the kids play. I think they'll maybe play with a bit more freedom. They can express themselves and show what they can do, and really they have the quality to really put in a decent performance. So I think 3-0 is a pretty fair shout. For United, it's tricky. If this was Old Trafford with fans, I'd be more worried. That ground just has a way of really, we're away. Has a way of pushing that side on, even when they're not in their best form. United on their day in front of that crowd can get one. But I'm going to go with a draw, I think, as well. They're not in a rich frame of form. Neither are we. I think they have their own problems that are just as bad or along similar issues as ours. So I'm going to go with the draw. I think, given what we've seen recently, I'd probably be happy with it. Not ecstatic, but anything's better than losing to that lot right now. So I'll go.
I get so frustrated in these games because, as you said there, Manchester United are in a vein of form in which they are suffering. But every single time we go and play these big away games, when these teams are in a bad vein of form or they've got injuries or they're changing manager, Arsenal play a defensive setup and let the opposition come onto them. And I just have that feeling that we're going to switch back to the 3-4-3 when we go away to Manchester United, because he's seen it work against City and against Chelsea and against Liverpool when we've needed it too. But at times, ultimately, and I said this at the start, and I said this in the breakdown earlier on about Partey and Aouar, is that if we play in a 3-4-3, we create minimal chances. And at the moment, we're not taking the minimal chances that we're making. We need to play in an offensive system. We need to go at them, and we need to create and take the chances at the end of the day. And I just can't see that happening right now. So,
I was going to ask everybody a second. I mean, do you really think? I mean, I don't know. It's difficult, but for me, I think you almost have to go for it, don't you? And you look at certain things
to lose. And
I don't like to pile on misery on players that have already been dealing with rough seasons. But if you look at someone like Harry Maguire right now, who was clearly not 100%, he's exposed for pace every day of the week. Do you go with an attacking lineup that will get into those areas to put him specifically under pressure? You get him into card trouble early. You know, you keep focusing on that one. That one crux of the issues at the back. You have to go for it. If you give them a chance to actually sit back and defend, where you don't expose their players, you're almost playing into what Ole Gunnar Solskjaer is going to want. I think you have to go for it. There's something about being when you're in your own bad vein of form, you have to take your own handbrake off and try to play your way out of it in a way. Playing very passive possession-based football is not going to play your way into form when your own form is struggling. You have to go and get a really brilliant result to kick those players on. And you've seen that across however many teams and however many leagues. You know, as Tom, you'll know, Barca are going to go out and absolutely smash someone next weekend because they just lost El Clasico. At least you think they're going to try to play that way. So you have to say the same thing kind of for us right now. You have to go out and you have to give these players a platform to go and get themselves back into some sort of decent form to where we can build from that. And there's no better result against a team right now who historically we do struggle against to go out and maybe build that platform for us. So I don't know if you guys agree, but that's what I want to say. I just want to go for it. You know?
Yeah. Any final words before we wrap up from Adam or Chris?
No, just I agree. I think Drew's right. We're both in a position where if we sit off the other team, they're going to struggle. So I think the game in itself could be a bit horrible to watch.
Yeah,
but
a damp squib.
Yeah, damp squib is the perfect way to put it.
I love that term.
We just get out there and like you said, play with the handbrake off and just all guns blazing. I really do think we can get a result, because I don't know how Drew can say he doesn't like piling misery on players, but I would love nothing more than to see Aubameyang tear Harry Maguire apart. So yeah. Chris,
I agree with Drew. If Arteta's got to change the narrative for what we've been seeing. I think if we play defensive and we don't get a result, a draw or a win, it's the narrative around and kind of the negativity surrounding Arsenal is just going to be questioned further. And then I think it starts to seep into the players' minds too, is that, you know, we have all this talent in our team. Why aren't we able to kind of express ourselves and play a bit more expansive? Why aren't we taking the game to the other team? And I think people aren't expecting us to get a result. So it goes in the same way that no matter what our form is, we can come on our day and play some good football too. So I do hope that we'll just kind of take the game from the scruff of the neck.
I'm nervous about this game because I have preached non-stop that this is the perfect fixture for Thomas Partey to be the transformative figure that I've said over and over again that he can be. So if he has an absolute stinker, I'm going to look a little bit silly. So I am nervous about this, but at the same time, I'm excited to see the difference in a Big Six away game with Thomas Partey in the midfield. But can we please, just Arteta, just if you are watching, bit of advice, can you tell the players to give him the ball? Because I'd really appreciate that, because we didn't really do that against Leicester. So could we try and put Partey on the ball a little bit more, especially in this game against United? Because I feel that he could be the difference for us in these Big Six away games. And I've put my money where my mouth is on this one, so that's for sure. Speaking of Partey, if you did manage to miss the tactical breakdown on his comparison with Aouar and the reasons why we correctly went for Partey over Aouar, make sure you check that video out as a tactical breakdown on the channel. And of course, please make sure you check out these guys' social medias, other than Chris, because he avoids it of all force. But thank you, Chris, for coming on. Absolute pleasure.
Thank you for having me on again,
bud.
Tom. Thank you again for having me on, and thank you to the chat for keeping it as lively as possible.
Yes, of course. And you see, Chris is one of our expert members, who we do expert member podcasts quite regularly where the members come on. And gradually, you're starting to see these expert members are making their way onto the main show, which is great to see. Loving that. And the fact we've had Jared, of course, and Owen comes on very regularly too. So thank you to our expert members. I will throw you up on the screen. Give me a moment. There they are. So thank you so much to our expert members and, of course, our TGT ambassadors as well. Thank you so much as always. And Adam, it's been a pleasure, mate. Tell people where they can find you and what you're going to be up to.
At TFO Show on Twitter and the Fifth Official on YouTube. And we've got a video coming out on Wednesday talking about the top 10 strikers in the league. So let's see how that goes.
I saw you were being a bit of a mediator for a Manchester United focused show earlier on social media, sat in the middle.
Yes. I always try to be the mediator, not me to come on.
It's good to see, mate. The referee in the Man United zone, which is a tough place to be. It definitely is. Drew, I mean, thank you for you genuinely have perked up the show today, which is nice.
You see,
good.
All this negative, but then there you go. Try to be the positive one for once. I don't know if it's going to come off very well, though. We'll see.
It's mad how Arsenal's putting me in the place where I'm starting to go, Pepe's not very good. And I'm starting to put the negative spin on things, which is different for a change. But yeah, no, it's great. And obviously tell people where they can find you and what you're going to be up to. Any new articles and fun stuff coming soon, wherever it may be?
I mean, you can find me at FM Lara on Twitter. I'm pretty much been writing about Arsenal at this point. I'm focusing solely on Bundesliga. That's just a personal choice. It's something that makes more sense considering the growth of that league in the United States and my experiences with it. So that's just kind of what I'm going to be focusing on from now on. I'll still be available to podcast, obviously. You and I spoke about that, so I'll still be here. I'm probably podcasting at Yama as well when that gets off the ground, but for writing purposes, not so much anymore. So my docile words about Arsenal won't be happening anymore.
It's fine. We got Owen for that now. So
that's very true. I trained him up well just for you. So there you go.
It was almost like a Pep Guardiola Arteta moment, passing on the reins.
But it was good to be back, and it was good to spend time with you boys on chat and everybody in the actual chat. Thanks for listening as usual. So
yes,
really appreciate it.
Pleasure. Thank you, Chatbox, for being the legends that you always are, and thank you for encouraging people to throw and get the likes up. We would appreciate that. And of course, if you are new somehow to the channel, if you could drop a subscription, we'd really appreciate it, and a like, of course, and hit that notification button so you never miss a show. This has been the Gooner Talk. Make sure you follow us over on Twitter at the Gooner Talk TV. We will be back very soon with previews for the upcoming games and some, of course, more new stuff, because I'm sure a certain German will tweet something at some point and we'll have to talk about it. So we'll be back for some news at some stage. We couldn't go a show without bringing him up at least once. So we will see you again very, very soon. And as always, up the Arsenal.